Welcome to the darkest corners of your imagination, where fear knows no boundaries. This is Mr. Night Scares Story, the home of spine-chilling tales that will haunt your dreams. Here, the night comes alive with stories of unspeakable terror, from cursed forests to haunted houses, from lurking shadows to untold urban legends. We bring you nightmares you'll never wake up from. Are you brave enough to face what lies ahead? Once you enter, there's no turning back. Subscribe now, if you dare. And remember, every story you hear here might just be true. Mr. Night Scares Story, where fear becomes reality. Story number 1. The Man in the Attic. Jenna Thompson had always loved her family's old Victorian home. It was beautiful, historic, and filled with character. But it was also large, too large for comfort when she was alone. This weekend, her parents were out of town on a business trip, and her younger brother was at a friend's house for a sleepover. That left Jenna, a 22-year-old college student, alone in the creaky, 3-story house at the edge of their quiet neighborhood. She didn't mind at first. The solitude was nice. She made popcorn, curled up on the couch, and put on a horror movie. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the old windows. The Victorian house had always made noise, settling groans, occasional creaks from the old wooden beams. But halfway through her movie, a noise came from above, a soft thump. Jenna froze. The sound had come from the attic. She swallowed hard, glancing at the ceiling. The attic was rarely used. Her parents stored old holiday decorations up there, but no one went inside regularly. Her dad always kept it locked. Another sound. This time, a slow, dragging noise, like something heavy being shifted across the floor. Her pulse quickened. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe the wind shaking the house, or an animal that somehow got inside. Taking a deep breath, she turned the volume up and tried to ignore it. But then, a soft creak in the hallway behind her. Jenna turned sharply, her heart slamming against her ribs. The hallway behind her was empty. Had she imagined it? Her phone vibrated on the couch beside her. She grabbed it, expecting a message from a friend. But instead, it was from her mom. "Mom, did you open the attic? Your dad swore he locked it before we left." Jenna's blood ran cold. "Me? No. Why?" The 3 dots appeared, indicating her mother was typing. Jenna gripped her phone tightly, staring at the hallway, feeling an overwhelming sense of unease. Then, another message came through. "Mom, because before we left, I thought I heard something up there." A sharp chill ran down Jenna's spine. Just as she processed the words, another noise from above. This time, not just a thump, but a soft, deliberate footstep. Jenna's breath came fast and shallow. This was ridiculous. She was letting fear get the best of her. She had to check. Otherwise, she'd spend the whole night paranoid. Grabbing the nearest thing she could use as a weapon, a heavy metal flashlight, she crept toward the hallway. The attic hatch was in the ceiling just above the second-floor landing. She stared up at it. Silence. Maybe it had been the wind. Maybe her mom had just imagined hearing something before they left. Then she saw it. A handprint. It was faint, smeared with dust, but undeniably human. And it was on the inside of the attic hatch. Jenna stumbled backward, her mind screaming at her to run. But before she could move, the hatch lifted, only an inch, just enough to see darkness beyond. Then it slowly lowered again. Jenna didn't hesitate. She ran. Down the stairs, through the living room, out the front door. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but she kept running, sprinting to the neighbor's house. She pounded on the door until Mr. Reynolds, the elderly man who lived next door, opened it with a startled look. "Jenna, what's wrong?" She could barely get the words out. "Someone's in my attic." Mr. Reynolds pulled her inside and immediately called the police. Jenna sat on his couch, gripping her phone with trembling hands, eyes locked on her house. From his living room window, she could see the attic window on the 3rd floor. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a shadow moved behind the glass. Her stomach dropped. The police arrived within minutes, sirens blaring. 2 officers entered the house, guns drawn. Jenna and Mr. Reynolds waited on the porch, watching the lights flicker inside as the officers searched. Then, after what felt like an eternity, they came out, and what they found made Jenna's skin crawl. Inside the attic, the police found evidence that someone had been living there. A thin, stained mattress lay in the corner, surrounded by empty food wrappers. A half-filled water bottle sat beside it. There was an old backpack stuffed with clothes and, worst of all, a rusted hunting knife. But the most horrifying discovery was the hole in the attic wall. It led into the narrow crawl space between the walls. The police determined that whoever had been in there had likely been sneaking in and out of the attic for weeks, maybe even months. Jenna felt sick. Had he watched her while she slept? Had he stood in the hallway while she showered? The police searched the house and the surrounding area, but they never found him. Whoever he was gone. Jenna never stayed in that house alone again. Her family moved out within a month, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. The new owners never reported anything unusual. But sometimes, when Jenna lies awake at night in her new apartment, she swears she hears it. A slow, deliberate creak above her bed. And in the silence, a whisper, "I never left." Story number 2. The basement door. The night Mia Evans was home alone, the storm hit hard. Rain lashed against the windows of her family's old house in upstate New York, and thunder rumbled through the sky like a distant growl. The wind howled, making the old wooden beams creak. Her parents had left that morning for an anniversary trip, and her little brother was at a friend's sleepover. She didn't mind. She had the house to herself, a stack of movies, and an extra-large pizza to keep her company. Wrapped in a blanket on the couch, she scrolled through her phone, half watching a horror movie. The flickering light from the TV cast eerie shadows on the walls, but she wasn't scared. Not yet. Then, just as the thunder cracked outside, the basement door creaked open. Mia froze. Slowly, she turned her head toward the hallway. The basement door, which was always closed, now stood open just an inch. A sliver of darkness stretched beyond it. She swallowed hard. The house was old. Sometimes doors popped open when the wind shook the house. That had to be it. Forcing herself to move, she got up, walked over, and pushed the door shut. Click. She turned the lock, securing it. A deep breath. Then she went back to the couch, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. But the unease had settled in, and it wouldn't go away. 15 minutes passed. Mia tried to focus on the movie, but she kept glancing toward the hallway, her ears straining over the storm outside. She was just being paranoid, until she heard it. Click. The unmistakable sound of a door unlocking. A slow, creeping chill slid down her spine, heart pounding. She turned her head. The basement door was open again, this time wider. A deep blackness yawned beyond it, leading down into the basement. The air that drifted out was damp, heavy, carrying the faint scent of earth and something else. Something rotting. Mia's fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. This wasn't the wind. Something was wrong. Forcing herself to move, she grabbed her phone and texted her dad. Hey, did you guys leave the basement door unlocked? A minute passed. The 3 dots appeared. Dad, no, it should be locked. Why? Her hands trembled as she typed. It keeps opening by itself. Pause. Then, Dad, Mia, listen to me very carefully. The hair on her arms stood on end. Dad, we never leave that door unlocked. A bolt of fear shot through her. Click. The basement door swung open all the way. Mia's breath came in shallow gasps. The door now stood completely open, revealing the black maw of the basement stairs. Something shifted in the shadows below. A creak on the steps. Mia stumbled backward, gripping her phone. She turned on the flashlight, aiming it toward the darkness. Nothing. The stairs stretched down into the pitch-black basement, but there was no movement, no shape. But then, a whisper, so soft, so close. She couldn't make out the words, but they came from the basement, and they were not hers. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She bolted for the front door, heart slamming against her ribs. Her shaking hands fumbled with the lock, Bang. A loud thud came from the basement. A footstep. She ripped open the door and ran into the storm. Mia stood on the porch, gasping for air, rain soaking her to the bone. Her dad was still on the line. "Dad." She choked out, I think someone's in the basement." Silence. Then, "Get out of there. I'm calling the police." The wind howled as she turned back toward the house. From here, she could see through the living room window. She could see the basement door, still open. And then, a shadow moved. Not fast, not jerky, just a slow, gliding shift of darkness. Lightning flashed. For half a second, the figure was visible. Tall, thin, standing at the top of the basement stairs. Watching her, Mia's stomach dropped. Her legs locked in place. Then, it stepped back into the darkness. Chapter 5: The Chair. The police arrived in under 10 minutes. 2 officers entered the house with guns drawn while another stayed with Mia on the porch. She shivered, drenched in rain, eyes locked on the front door. Every nerve in her body was screaming. Then, the officers returned, and their faces told her everything. They had found something. She followed them inside, her breath hitching. The basement was small, concrete floors, exposed wooden beams. And in the center of the room, a chair. A single wooden chair, facing the stairs. As if someone had been sitting there, watching, waiting. Mia felt sick. Is there any way someone could have gotten in? One of the officers shook his head. No signs of forced entry. And the windows down here are bolted shut. Her skin prickled. Then how? The officer didn't answer, because he didn't have one. The police searched the entire house. They found no intruder, no evidence of a break-in. Just the chair. And the whisper, because when they played back the security footage from the living room camera, it caught something chilling. At 10:43 p.m., just minutes before Mia had fled the house, the camera picked up audio. Faint voice, coming from inside the basement. The officers played it back for her. It was distorted, barely audible under the sound of the storm. But the words were clear. "Don't go." Mia's blood ran cold. Her parents cut their trip short and returned home the next day. They changed the locks, installed new security systems. But Mia never spent another night alone in that house. And sometimes, even years later, she still dreams about it. The basement door, the whisper in the dark, and the figure standing at the top of the stairs, watching her. Story number 3, The Man in the Vents. Jessica Lane wasn't afraid of being home alone. At 21, she had grown up in the same house her whole life, a comfortable 2-story home in a quiet Pennsylvania suburb. Her parents had left for the weekend to visit family, and she had turned down the trip, eager for a peaceful weekend to herself. Friday night was perfect. She ordered takeout, watched movies, and curled up in bed early. But around 2:17 a.m., something woke her up. A sound, faint, scratching, like something moving inside the walls. She sat up, holding her breath. The room was silent except for the ticking of her bedside clock. Then, scritch, scritch, scritch. It was coming from the air vent. Jessica exhaled shakily and reached for her phone. She turned on the flashlight, aiming it at the ceiling vent above her bed. The metal grate looked normal, closed, secure. She laughed at herself, shaking her head. Probably just a mouse, she muttered, forcing herself to relax. But then, a breath, soft, shallow, right above her. Jessica's body froze. It was so faint, she almost convinced herself she had imagined it, until the vent shifted, a slow, subtle creak as if someone was pressing against it from the inside. Jessica's stomach twisted. She shot out of bed and ran to the hallway, heart slamming against her ribs. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the house phone and dialed her mom. It rang once, twice, then her mom's groggy voice came through. "Jess? It's late. What's wrong?" Jessica swallowed. I think there's something in the vents." A long pause. Then, very quietly, her mother whispered, "Jess, we don't have vents." The blood drained from Jessica's face. She turned, staring at the vent in the hallway. How had she never realized? Their house had no central air, no ventilation system. The metal grates were decorative. But then what had moved inside it? A creak sounded above her. Jessica ran. She grabbed her car keys and bolted for the front door. But as she reached for the lock, a thump. Something heavy landed in the attic above her. Jessica whimpered, backing away. Then slowly, the attic door in the hallway began to lower. Jessica ran to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife she could find. Her phone shook in her hand as she dialed 911. The operator picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Jessica's voice came out a whisper. There's someone in my attic. Please hurry. The dispatcher kept her on the line. Jessica backed into a corner, keeping her eyes locked on the attic door. It hung open now, revealing only darkness. The police arrived within 6 minutes. 2 officers stormed inside, guns drawn. They searched the house, and when they climbed into the attic, they found him. A man, dirty, thin, eyes wide with hunger. He had been living there. For how long, they couldn't say. They found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, a notebook filled with rambling, scrawled words. But the worst part? Peephole, cut directly above Jessica's bed. Jessica never stayed in that house again. Her parents moved within the month. They never found out how long the man had been inside. But when the police questioned him, he just kept repeating the same thing, over and over. I was waiting. I was waiting. I was waiting. For what? He never said. And Jessica never wanted to know. Story number 4. The voices in the baby monitor. Lisa Reynolds was used to being alone at night. As a 25-year-old college student, she worked part-time as a babysitter for extra cash. The Watsons, a wealthy couple in her town, paid her generously to watch their 1-year-old daughter, Ella. The job was simple: feed Ella, put her to bed by 8 p.m., and relax in their spacious home until the parents returned. That Friday night, Lisa curled up on the Watsons' plush couch, flipping through TV channels. The baby monitor sat beside her, silent except for the occasional rustle of Ella shifting in her crib. Everything was peaceful, until she heard it. A whisper, soft, distant, coming through the baby monitor. Lisa frowned, turning up the volume. Static. Then, a man's voice. She's beautiful when she sleeps. Lisa's stomach dropped. She shot up from the couch, eyes locked on the baby monitor. Her heart pounded as she listened. Silence. Then, another voice. A woman this time. Don't wake her yet. Lisa's breath hitched. She grabbed the monitor and stared at the screen. The night vision camera showed Ella, peacefully asleep in her crib. No one else was in the room, but she could still hear them. The whispers. Soon, Lisa bolted. She sprinted up the stairs, heart hammering. She threw open Ella's door. Empty. Ella lay still in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling. No one else was there. Lisa scanned the room, breathing hard. The closet door was slightly ajar. Her fingers shook as she reached for it. Bang! The baby monitor shut off. Lisa's blood ran cold. The monitor had been plugged into the wall. Couldn't just turn off. She backed away from the closet, scooped up Ella, and rushed downstairs. Hands trembling, she grabbed her phone and called Mrs. Watson. It rang once, twice, then, Lisa? Mrs. Watson sounded sleepy. Lisa forced herself to speak. Mrs. Watson, I heard something on the baby monitor. A man's voice, then a woman's. Silence. Then Mrs. Watson whispered, Lisa, we don't have a baby monitor with audio. Lisa's blood went ice cold. She turned, staring at the silent monitor on the coffee table, and then crackled back to life. A deep voice came through. We see you. Lisa ran. She grabbed the baby and rushed out the front door, standing on the porch with shaking hands. She called 911. The police arrived within 10 minutes. They searched the house top to bottom, and in Ella's room, hidden inside the stuffed bear on her shelf, they found a camera, a small, black lens, live streaming. The Watsons were horrified. They swore they had never installed a camera, and when the police traced the signal, they found it. It was broadcasting to an unknown location. Somewhere in the same town, someone had been watching, listening, and waiting. Lisa quit babysitting after that night. The Watsons moved, terrified of who had been watching their child. The police never found out who set up the camera. But 3 days later, Lisa received an anonymous text message. No name, no number, just 2 words. Still watching. She moved out of town the next week, and she never looked back.